Hello everyone, welcome back to the tip series. Today we have a ton of really useful tips, a lot of chemistry tips, a lot of infinite resources tips. We are jumping into the MV age, so let's get started. Real quick guys, we're going to break down this video and the tips are going to be kind of separated. The first 5 are infinite resources, and then the next ones kind of have to do with power generations, and then the next one is chemistry, very useful, right? And the next one is power and power distribution. And then the next few tips have to do with ore processing, and the last ones are some miscellaneous ones that you guys have given, or just didn't fit into the other categories. Little bonus tips. Our first tip here is infinite aluminum from diorite. So if you get yourself an LV rock crusher, this makes 1 diorite cobble every 7 ticks. All you have to do is pop a single diorite cobble in there. Then you route this into an advanced macerator, so you're in MV age, right? You get yourself diorite dust by macerating this. And with this diorite dust, you can route it straight into a basic centrifuge. LV's fine. It's gonna centrifuge this diorite dust, and you're gonna get clay dust and mirabolite dust. They're both useful. Clay dust is super useful though, as in here, if you route the mirabolite and the clay dust both into the electrolyzer, you can see the electrolyzer is gonna electrolyze 13 clay dust, and you are going to get infinite sodium, infinite lithium, infinite aluminum, and infinite silicon. You're also going to get some water as a byproduct. Route that water just into a super tank and click on void, and it'll just void all the water from it, because you don't actually need that. Then with the mirabolite dust, it's also going into here. Electrolyzing this gives you oxygen. Now this is actually very useful. You need a lot of oxygen in Gregtech. You're also going to get more sulfur and sodium, so more infinite materials. You're going to get 10 buckets of water, so make sure you're dealing with this or your machine is going to fill up with water. But this oxygen is great. Get that into your system. You'll use it for your EBF a lot as well in MV. So all of this is just from one rock crusher making cobble, completely free, right? All you need is energy to get this working. The materials you're getting from this: infinite sulfur, infinite aluminum, that's incredible. You really need that. Infinite sodium, very useful. Infinite silicon, it's going to be useful later. And then infinite lithium, which is great for batteries. And then over here we have a similar setup. If you use raw granite and then you crush this raw granite, you can centrifuge it for silicon dioxide dust. Later on, I'll show you, you can electrolyze this to get a ton of oxygen and silicon. We don't use it, but if you want, the red rock dust that you also get from granite can give you calcite and flint. Flint you can use for like making glass, very useful, and infinite calcite is pretty useful if you want to make dissolved calcium acetate, or if you want quicklime and carbon dioxide, or if you want calcium and carbon. Like, there's a lot of infinite materials you can get with that. We don't really find much of a use for it. We'll add on another setup here for Gabbro, but it's going to require HV, so that'll be later. Let's move on to tip number 2. Automating oxygen, chlorine, and hydrogen. These are super useful if you know you've ever played Gregtech, and you can get infinite of these really easy. So what we have here is seawater being routed into these 6 electrolyzers. 7 electrolyzers. Now that infinite seawater is just coming from this one pump, and it's pumping from seawater into a super tank, and that's being routed all the way over to those electrolyzers. It's super quick. It doesn't require a lot of stress units. 1,000 is very overkill. As you can see, this is always maxed out at 8,000 buckets of seawater. So we have more infinite resources here: oxygen, chlorine, hydrogen. We're also getting small piles of sodium hydroxide, which we are putting into a packer to turn into normal piles rather. We're also getting more infinite sodium. That's also pretty useful, but we have a lot. This sodium hydroxide dust, however, is useful because we can electrolyze it, like I said earlier, for sodium, but more importantly, more oxygen. That's what this last one here is doing. If we route this, we don't have it hooked up right now, but if you route sodium and hydroxide dust into here, you'll get even more hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is really important because this doesn't quite make enough later on. It's fine for what you are at right now, but later on, this won't quite make enough. And this is an MV recipe. We are just using it. It's an LV recipe if you really want, but we are running them at HV for a little more because you're going to use a lot of hydrogen later on. I would recommend setting up this sodium hydroxide dust to just be electrolyzed as well, so you can go ahead and get that little extra hydrogen out of every 3. Another quick bonus tip here: if you combine this chlorine and hydrogen, you can get hydrogen chloride, which is useful in a lot of chemistry, and that's infinite. But moving on over into tip number 3, centrifuging lava can get you a lot of infinite resources. More silicon dioxide, you can get magnesia, which you can turn into magnesium, you can get quicklime, you can get gold, just straight up gold, you can get sapphire, which you can use to get more aluminum or oxygen. Again, we have infinite of those now though. And then you can get tantalite. Tantalite's going to come in handily pretty soon. You're going to want to electrolyze that into tantalum because that's how you're going to make your capacitors. The capacitors are very, very necessary if you want to get into ME storage at all. Also going to be useful in circuits. Tantalum capacitors, just very useful. I would recommend setting up a little setup like this. You have an advanced centrifuge. This is an HV1, but it is an MV recipe, as you can see. And you just have that input lava, output into a few super chests. We have 6 here. They each have, you know, silicon dioxide, sapphire, quicklime, etc. Sorry you can't see them. If I put the wrench, there you go. We have 10,000 gold nuggets. Super useful if we ever need gold. And this is just powered by one little generator, and it doesn't even require that much power. For the lava, we're doing the same thing we did in the previous tips video. If you put a hose pulley down and put some lava under it, it does treat it as infinite in this Terrafirmagreg pack. If you're playing normal Gregtech, it probably won't, but there's plenty other ways of getting infinite lava. This is very useful. Route that on over into a centrifuge. You can get a lot of resources out of it. Okay, we're here for my favorite tip. I know I already gave you a ton of infinite resources tip, but this one is amazing. It's very, very cheeky, okay? Tip number 4, infinite iron, EBF into steel, bender to plates, 8 plates to LV casing, arc furnace to blue and red steel, break down into colored steels for all parts, including copper, gold, bronze, tin, etc. Got that? Let's go through it. Arc furnace. This is going to be how you get your wrought iron. Put an iron dust in there, a little bit of oxygen. You have infinite of that, no problem. You're going to get a single wrought iron out of that. Now, if you come over here and you stick that wrought iron into an electric blast furnace, you're going to get steel out of it. Already, you have almost infinite steel, right? All you need is iron to fuel it. Now, with this steel, let's check this out. You can bend it into plates, just with your bender, easy enough, right? Bend that into 8 steel plates, and then with an assembler on 8, make a bunch of LV machine casing. So far, we've turned iron into LV machine casings. Now here is where the fun part comes in. You take this LV machine casing and then you stick it back in the arc furnace. And now what we've done is we've turned iron into blue steel and red steel without any of the messy components that it takes to make this blue steel and red steel dust, like brass, black steel, rose gold dust. Steel, rose gold takes copper and gold. Super useful. So now you have a way to turn iron into blue steel and red steel, but there's more we can do. There's so much more. First off, take your red steel ingot, go ahead and put that in a macerator and get your red steel dust. Super low voltage recipe, don't worry about that. Then, with this red steel dust, what you can do is you put it in your centrifuge. LV recipe, you don't even need MV for this. But then you can get infinite black steel dust, infinite bismuth bronze dust, and infinite sterling silver dust. Now the bismuth bronze, you can centrifuge this for infinite bismuth, zinc, and copper, and then the sterling silver, you can centrifuge that for infinite copper and silver. You see how many resources we're getting out of just red steel? Let's take a look at blue steel. Blue steel, you stick your blue steel ingot in here, and you can get a blue steel dust. Stick that in a centrifuge like before, you're getting steel dust, black steel dust, brass dust, and rose gold. Now the rose gold dust is made of copper and gold, and then the brass dust is made of zinc and copper, even more infinite resources. So we've gotten all of this, and all it's taken us is 8 steel ingots, or 8 iron dust. But let's take a look here. Out of 1 red steel ingot, if you break it down into its dust, 8 red steel dust, you're actually getting 2 steel dust back. Same thing with our blue steel dust. If you take 8 of it and you centrifuge it, you're getting 2 more steel dust back. So that means with 16 of our steel dust, we're getting 4 back. In other words, you're getting a pretty big return on your investment here, so you won't have to just rely on your iron source for all of these infinite materials. Either way, it's way better than going out and mining for all the different materials. Just get iron. Now there is one more cheeky thing we can do here. This is tip number 5. You can transmute copper into redstone. So our copper that we can get out of a few of these things here, right? Brass dust gives you a ton. If you take this copper, red alloy has a couple interesting recipes. The first is in a crucible, you can take 4 copper and 1 redstone, but in a mixer, it takes 4 redstone and 1 copper. So the centrifuge recipe to undo red alloy dust gives 4 redstone, 1 copper. Theoretically, you could transmute copper to redstone like this. Okay, moving on into our next section, which is power generation. Tip number 6 is crafting 16x cables down. So if you make a 16x, let's say aluminum wire, right, in a wire mill, it takes about 10 seconds to make, but then using this 16x, you can craft 4, and then you can craft 4, and then you can craft 4. It's just much more efficient to bulk craft a bunch of 16x wires and then craft them down into the ones you actually need, like 8x, 4x, 2x, 1x, etc. It's much faster, more efficient, easier to store. Tip number 7, multi-block steam boiler for powering your benzene automation. So this kind of will go into the next tip, but firstly here, if you guys haven't already done so, go ahead and make a large bronze boiler, or 2 or 3. You can use wall sharing on these, so it does cut down the cost a little bit, but you should have infinite bronze from this bismuth bronze, right? Your next upgrade is going to be steel, but that's not going to be util HV, so stick with these for now. You probably shouldn't need to make the other ones, but you might eventually. Now, with your big old bronze boiler, you should route this into some steam turbine generators, and that's going to take us into our next tip, number 8, benzene automation. So this whole steam generation operation is just to power our benzene automation, which is what we actually run the base on. Get yourself a pyrolyze oven. This is 2. They have wall sharing again, so it'll cut down the resources. If you want to make a double, you probably don't need to. This was very overkill. With your pyrolyze oven, what you want to do is you want to stick kapok logs in there. You'll see on circuit 9, 16 of those logs is going to give you 20 charcoal and some wood tar. This is what we want. Have your charcoal route into a super chest, because you're going to have a lot of it. We have over 100,000. And then have your wood tar come out here and go into a super tank. Now, with this charcoal, you want to route it into, I would say, probably 8 extractors, and that's going to turn it into wood tar. So now our outputs is wood tar and then charcoal into wood tar. For now, all you have to do is stick it in a distillery and you have infinite benzene now. Congratulations. Later on the line, you can put it into a distillation tower and get a lot of resources out of it, but for now, you have infinite benzene. Automated. Easy. Okay, I have a quick little bonus tip here that you actually submitted to me. If you have made this tree farm like we have, again, it's just a bunch of saws and then a bunch of deployers, and it rotates around. It plants the saplings behind it, make sure you put them on the filter, and then the saws cut everything that way. You do have to glue everything together, so make sure you have some glue. You can use any sort of storage. We use a silo and a chest just in case, but the quick tip here is use a windmill bearing and then just stick some windmill sails on it and that'll power itself. You don't have to have any external stress units power from Create like water wheels or boilers or anything. And this is what you're going to use to get your infinite logs to power your benzene production in those pyrolyze oven. You can also get infinite sticks and infinite saplings that you can use later down the line. For now, infinite logs is what you want. Tip number 9, polyethylene production. So this one is very necessary pretty early on. It's just oxygen and ethylene makes polyethylene. Pretty easy in theory, right? Infinite oxygen's fine. The ethylene is where it gets a little bit tricky. Make ethylene, I would recommend doing this route. This is going to require ethanol and sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is pretty easy. It's just hydrogen sulfide and oxygen. You have infinite oxygen already. The hydrogen sulfide, this recipe, very easy. You have infinite hydrogen, infinite sulfur. You can combine those, get hydrogen sulfide, turn that into your sulfuric acid. Boom, you have one of the 2 ingredients needed to make the ethylene to make polyethylene. Then for the ethanol, I would recommend distilling biomass. Now, how do we go about getting this biomass? It's actually pretty easy. If you brew biochaff, you get biomass. Now to get this biochaff, you macerate plant balls. Now to get plant balls, all you have to do is centrifuge some of your infinite kapok. And you're actually going to get a few more useful resources out of this, like sticky resin, wood pulp, carbon dioxide, and methane gas. But yeah, centrifuge more of your kapok logs, and you'll get tons and tons of plant balls out of that. Macerate that up into biochaff, and then brew it into biomass, and you have infinite ethanol, which is actually very, very, very useful. So definitely go this route for making ethylene and then turn that into some polyethylene. That's my chosen route. If you have suggestions, go and put them in the comments, but I think that's probably the easiest route of going there. Now, tip number 10 is polyvinyl chloride. Along the same vein as our plastics, our polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride is actually going to take vinyl chloride and then air. You can use air, you can use oxygen, it doesn't matter. If you need air, go and get an air collector. They're pretty easy to make. You're going to need one eventually anyway. They make a lot of air very easily, infinite air. You can make it at LV. The only annoying part is the metal bars. So if you don't want to bother, go ahead and use the oxygen route. I just paused my recording to take a phone call, and then I did a few more tips and then realized I never hit unpause. So let's rewind a little bit in my brain. you guys won't see any of it. Go ahead and hit that like button or subscribe for my poor brain. Let's get back into it. So vinyl chloride, right? It's actually pretty easy to get because you've already done polyethylene. Vinyl chloride, you have infinite chlorine from your seawater. Ethylene, you already have it from your polyethylene production. That's just your ethanol and sulfuric acid. Already done. The chemistry isn't actually that scary, right? Polyvinyl chloride, we are good to go on that. Now, a quick little bonus tip with tanks. They don't work the way you think they would. Fluid locking doesn't work. Fluid voiding doesn't always work the way you want. It'll still accept other fluids and it'll void them. So you should definitely, if you want to use super tanks and you have more than one thing going into them or passing through them, like this, we have titanium fluid pipes going into these two machines, definitely use a fluid filter and put it on the input of a machine. That is the best way to do it. Putting on the output of something doesn't really work. Put it on the input of the machine where you're inputting it, and that seems to be the best way of stopping fluids from being voided or accidentally going into a machine that's locked to a different fluid, etc. This is going to take us into our next section, which is power distribution. If you have your power generation up there, right, that's where our power generation is coming from. There's a battery buffer up there for a last resort battery buffer. Very, very useful. It also makes our power generation 16 amps. Those 16 amps, wire them down, and then since 16 amps only powers 60 machines, that's not super useful to route to your entire base, right? But if you put a local power buffer on each one, that'll increase the amperage again. That up there will charge all of these battery buffers, and each 16x battery buffer will output 16 amps on its own to power a line of 16 machines. This is how I would go about power for now in Gregtech. You have your power generation, you have the low amperage 16 amps coming out, but then on each 16 line, you can have this full of batteries. We use these kind of batteries. You can go and use your medium lithium batteries, and that'll charge them up. This takes us into tip number 12, upgrading your EBF and using transformers. So transformers are super useful. They transform down usually, but if you hit them with a mallet or a screwdriver, I believe, you can have them transform up, which means you can turn MV power generation into HV power generation, or LV into MV, etc. And we want a similar setup like you did last time. These energy hatches, you will have MV ones. They take 2 amps of power each. You can go ahead and do what you did last time, stick some turbine generators down, 2 for each energy hatch, and then you can use a transformer if you want, or you can use a battery buffer so there's no voltage loss and you don't have to deal with superconductors. Just like last time, I would also very much recommend getting yourself some Canthal coil blocks. Canthal is pretty easy to get because of what you did earlier. You have infinite aluminum. Iron dust isn't that bad to get, iron was plentiful. And then chromium, I have a tip later that'll show you how to get a lot of chromium after our ore processing section. Quick little bonus tip for your EBF, if you have it output into a aluminum crate, you can stick a conveyor, and then on the input of that, put an item tag filter and type in hot_ingots, no caps, no space, filter insert. So that'll filter it so all of the items trying to be transferred with the conveyor will only be transferred if they have a hot ingot. And then you put that in an aluminum crate next to an input bus here, which will take your vacuum freezer and it can cool your ingots for you. Super useful. This takes us into our next section, which is ore processing. Tip number 13 is your miner setup. So if you have a bunch of advanced miners, these are MV, you can actually set them so they all output to each other. The red box means it's outputting, so if you put them in a line like this, that's how these look. They'll all output to each other, and then they'll output into an aluminum crate, so you don't have to go around and collect everything. And then you can go ahead and put a battery in each of these. The battery slot is hidden. It is there, you can see, but it is hidden. I don't know why. It might be the bug with the pack or something, but you can power all of these with batteries. Just bring maybe 4 miners, 8 miners, heck, you can bring 16 miners with you and 16 batteries. The medium lithium batteries actually last a long time on these because I think these use very little EU per tick, so it's a lot more than 164 seconds of power. It's actually maybe 5 to 10 minutes of power for each one. That is plenty to get a ton of resources with whatever you found with your ore prospector, and you don't have to do any manual mining. It's very, very useful. Make sure you cover them though. If it rained right now, all of these bad boys would blow up, so I should probably pick them up. Now, tip number 14 is ore processing. This is very, very important. With all of your ores, you want to go ahead and pipe them down. You can use your small polyvinyl chloride item pipes now if you want, or you can stick to the tin ones. They're super cheap. These transfer so many items, and polyvinyl chloride, like I showed you, is actually easier than you think to get. What you want is you want all of your raw ores being crushed. You can go ahead and use the create crushing wheels, or you can use a line of macerators. Then, once you've macerated everything, go ahead and route them into ore washers. These ore washers here will wash your crushed ores, and then you'll get purified ores. You can go ahead and put distilled water in them. Distilled water is very, very easy to get. It's literally just a distillery with water in it. You will get some unfortunate byproducts, and I'll show you how to filter this. You want them all outputting, right, into a single crate. And this crate, treat it as the same. This is an HV setup, so this will be for later. So everything is going into here. Then on the top, you are probably going to want to output dust, because you will get some dust out of it. You can do a tag filter in a conveyor to make it so all the dust are getting taken out and they're just going into your output, right? This is the output of all your ore processing. Then over here, you want to make sure that your conveyor here is another filter, item tag filter on dusts, but it does not allow dust, because you don't want dust going to these. You want everything else going into your advanced thermal centrifuges. Then similar process as last time, they all output and they go into a crate. You're still going to get some dust out of it, so go ahead and on that crate put a conveyor. You want to whitelist dusts to go out the top, and then you want to blacklist dust to go out the side. Everything else will go back here, then you're going to macerate it one more time. So you're going to have this setup basically 3 times. You macerate everything, then you filter out the dust to go up, and then you are going to put everything into your ore washers. You are going to filter out your dust at the top, and then you're going to have all your washed crushed ores go over here. Then they come over here. You're going to have your dust again and go out the top, and then your thermal centrifuged ores go into some macerators, and the macerators will go out the top. Also, what's really nice is all of these use really low voltage. I think this could be even LV, even though these are EV macerators. Super, super useful. Now for ore processing your gems and such, you can have it set up like this. So the output of your ore washers is actually filtered. So it doesn't use those like rubies, topaz, etc. Any of those like diamonds. And you could have another output over here that whitelists those. So what we've done is we made it so all gems that we put in there so far, these are just the ones we have set up. There's plenty more. We don't process them yet. These will go out the top and they'll go just into their final stage, just sifters. That's it. You would much rather sift them for the chance of exquisite and better stuff, especially with rubies and stuff that you're going to need for fluix crystals later on and nether quartz. So go ahead and set that up if you want. I hope that was enough explanation for this. It's not that complicated, but it is a lot to deal with ore processing here. Tip number 15 is a little bit more to do with ore processing. It's sodium persulfate and iron 3 chloride. Now, it says in MV that now sodium persulfate and iron 3 chloride are useful if you want to chemical bath some things. We don't use it though. It says it's completely optional but pretty rewarding. I don't find it that rewarding actually, because of so many resources you can just get infinite of very easily in this pack. So sodium persulfate and iron 3 chloride, I would recommend ignoring that for now and just use them to get good cheaper circuit boards. Sodium persulfate is kind of annoying to get because you have to make the sodium bisulfate, which is reacting sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide. You should have these already set up though, so you could easily get sodium persulfate. And then iron 3 chloride, you have infinite hydrochloric acid, so all you need is a little bit of iron dust. You have infinite hydrochloric acid because from the seawater you have infinite hydrogen and chlorine, so you kind of have infinite iron 3 chloride. You just need to add a little bit of iron dust sprinkled in. Okay guys, I'm gonna rattle off some bonus tips here. Tip number 16, for stainless steel you can get chromium from macerating crushed ruby ore. In the very first step you can macerate it and get a little bit of chromium. Then you can ore wash it and get a lot more chromium. And then in your final step, after it's been thermal centrifuged, you can get macerated and get even more chromium. This is very useful. Chromium is not easy to get, as you can see. You have to mine chromite or you have to get rubies. Ruby veins are massive, so you can get a ton of rubies super easily. Would recommend this route for getting your chromium. Tip number 17 is how to make your own automations. So we do diagrams. I'll pop one up here, and usually our diagrams are a little more complicated. But for example, for these 4 extractors would use 1 distiller, and then these 4 extractors would use another distiller, I believe. Maybe it was 8 to 1. I'm not exactly sure on the math on that. It's been a while, but all of the processing is usually in millibuckets. So 1 bucket is 1,000 liters or 1 millibucket. So I would recommend using those conversion rates and stuff, and make sure when you're mapping out a process, you check what voltage you're running it at. So if you were making vinyl chloride at medium voltage, it takes half the time. So you would actually make 1 bucket every 4 seconds. So that's about a quarter bucket per second. That's how I would go about measuring out like ratios and everything for uptime. But in general, any amount of passive is better than nothing. So go ahead and just get it working. Tip number 18 is crafting small and tiny dusts in your inventory. So if we look at gallium arsenide, one that you're gonna need quite a bit of. If you look at a small pile of gallium arsenide, it says you can craft it using 1 gallium arsenide dust. If you look at a tiny pile, same thing in the same area. A little strange, right? But if we come here and we put the gallium arsenide in the center, it's not gonna give us anything. Put it at the top, however, and we get small piles of gallium arsenide. Put it at the top left and you'll get tiny piles of gallium arsenide. So you don't have to make a packer. You don't have to worry about like unpacking this. You can just use the crafting. You just have to put it in slot 1 or 2, and that'll make tiny versus small. Tip number 19. I would still stick with blue and red steel tools. Those are going to be your fastest and most durable all the way until you get to IV, actually, until you get to tungsten carbide. Your blue and red steel tools are still great. I would recommend upgrading to drills though. If you can, go and make an MV blue steel drill. That's going to be faster than your red steel drill. And you can also make a blue steel wrench, which is going to be pretty useful. I would recommend using MV and then using a turbocharger to charge them up. Tip number 20 is dealing with hazardous materials. Yes, they are annoying. And you can, at this point, finally make a hazmat suit. You will need polyvinyl chloride sheets, you'll need lead plates, and you'll need rubber ingots. The most difficult part for this one is going to be this gas mask filter. You need activated carbon dust. You already have polyethylene. Activated carbon dust are going to require nitrogen and carbon in a pyrolyzed oven. You only need, 2 of them to make your gas mask, and that's the only thing you'll ever make them for again. So don't bother like automating that or anything. Just go ahead and make a few in your pyrolyzed oven and then put it back on your benzene production. Another way of dealing with hazardous materials before you get a hazmat suit is using a little bit more HP. So if you have salads or you have sandwiches, they will increase your max speed by a lot. But even better than that is if you find a little bit of spring water and take it with you mining. Say I put this down here, it is going to heal me, and that'll negate a lot of the damage from picking up hazardous materials. Another thing you can do, at least in this pack, is you can get some aged beer, and this will, if you drink it, it'll actually give you an HP boost. So that's super useful. Well, that's all the tips I have for you guys today. I really appreciate the support on this tip series. It is a lot more work than my other series to make, and but it's a lot of fun. I think it's very, very useful to have this like all in one place. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. These videos get so many views, and the subscriber count is very, very small compared to it, but I'm doing it for the community. So as always, have a good one, everyone.